All right, good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, November 19, 2024 Urbandale City Council meeting. I will call the meeting to order and ask clerk to take roll call, please.
Bodie.
Here.
Carberry Montgomery.
Here.
Kroll.
Here.
McBurney.
Here.
Rosendahl.
Here. Please stand as you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Urbandale is a national leader in character counts, endeavoring at all times to promote and model the principles of trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. In conducting tonight's meeting, we expect that all participants will act in a respectful manner consistent with these principles. Item 2 is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by McBurney.
Second.
Second by Kroll. Discussion. Please vote. That passed, right? That passed? Okay, that passes. All right, we will move on to presentations. We have two special proclamations for tonight. First is the proclamation for Small Business Saturday 2024. Whereas the City of Urbandale celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy. And whereas small businesses employ almost half of the private sector employees in the United States, and nearly 25% of employees in Urbandale work in the retail industry. And whereas the City of Urbandale supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now therefore, I, Robert Andewig, Mayor of the City of Urbandale, do hereby proclaim November 30, 2024 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and to shop small throughout the year. And I believe we have a few representatives from the Urbandale Chamber here to accept this.
You who don't know who I am, I'm Tiffany Menke. I'm president of the Urbandale Chamber of Commerce. This really means a lot to our small businesses. As you mentioned, Bob, the makeup of our organization, we have so many small businesses that make this up, and it really is the backbone of our economy, are our small businesses. So anyone, I always encourage you, shop small. We say shop small, shop chamber, shop local. It really makes a difference. There's a meme that always goes around on the internet that says, you know, it's always expensive to shop small until you're asking these small businesses to support the baseball team and the choirs and the band. These are the businesses that give back to our community. So this really means a lot to them, and we accept this on their behalf. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thanks so much, and thanks for everything you do for the chamber. And you're right, and with all the ribbon cuttings we go to, you know, 90% of them are small businesses, and it's great what makes up our economy. So thank you very much for the report. All right, we'll move on to another special recognition. And before I read this, I'm going to turn it over to our Parks and Rec Director, Jan Herkey, to kick us off. So, Jan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Have a recognition tonight. I do want to certainly mention through the Parks and Rec Department throughout the years, we have many, many volunteers. We just had the Uplift Urbandale events. We have chamber or the different scout groups and Eagle Scouts, but we have two individuals here tonight that I've been here with the city 26 years, and they've been involved a lot, but with volunteering, in particular, the Memorial Tree Park, Charles gave us Memorial Tree Park and Gardens, just south of the library, and the Butterfly Garden next to the library. This past year, over 150 hours of volunteer time, similar last year as well. So I'm excited for an opportunity to acknowledge them, and we have a proclamation for them.
All right. Whereas the City of Urbandale honors those residents who generously dedicate their time and effort to enhancing our public spaces and fostering community pride. And whereas Arlene Dabill and Bruce Bernard have selflessly contributed over 150 hours of volunteer work in Charles Gabus Memorial Tree Park and Gardens, taking on the essential tasks of weeding, trimming, maintaining the park's natural beauty. And whereas their dedication to creating a clean, safe, and welcoming environment in the Memorial Tree Park reflects their commitment to the well-being of the entire community. And whereas through their hard work, Arlene Dabill and Bruce Bernard have not only improved the appearance and functionality of the Memorial Tree Park, but have also set a valuable example of civic responsibility and volunteerism for all residents of Urbandale. Now therefore, I, Robert Andewig, Mayor of the City of Urbandale, on behalf of the Urbandale City Council, the Urbandale Parks and Recreation Department, and the entire community, do hereby formally recognize and express our deepest gratitude and appreciation to Arlene Dabill and Bruce Bernard for their exceptional contributions and commitment to our community. And I want to present this to them. Before I do, I just want to say personally,
A really good 40 years for us here. I realized on our way over here, we moved to Urbandale in 1984, and they've been here this 40 years. It's a great community to live in. There's no reason you can't be involved if you want to be. Open arms, we're ready to take you in and give you some fun things to do. And if you're creative, you can come up with a lot of different ways to do a lot of different things. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
if you're in a pinch for a Santa, Bruce can do that too, so. Thank you both for everything you've done for our community. Truly appreciate it.
Mayor, council members, do I need to push a
Nope,
button?
you're
or-
good. You're good.
Okay.
You're on, all right.
Hard to tell. My name is Scott Dickerson. Thanks for letting me come up here tonight. I own several small businesses in the area, including Style and Paz Play Place at 3901 121st Street in Urbandale. And a big believer in getting back to the community, involved in a lot of different things, both locally as well as my hometown in Perry, and doing different things. And we talk about so many positive things that the small businesses do for not only Urbandale, but every community. And I'm a big believer in that, and I'm 100% behind it. With the businesses, we employ a lot of people, both adults and high school students too. I think with the good also comes frustrations that need to be voiced, I guess. And I come up here not to complain or anything like that. It's more just an awareness. So again, we opened Style and Paz Play Place in December of 2020. And last year, 2023, we renegotiated our lease and we expanded. We exercised our option to open a second outdoor run behind the building. And the gentleman, the contractor that did the work, submitted the drawings, got approval, built it. And then we were told a few weeks later that we either had to move it or we had to submit a statement of procedures on how we would maintain cleanliness and prevent any type of runoff, environmentally hazard runoff. Submitted that information, and a year goes by. We submitted a permit to do some small revisions on the interior. And then I find out that, nope, you guys can't do that. We can't approve this because the outdoor run hasn't been resolved. Okay, well, that was a year ago. And it's like, okay, no problem. So I submitted, I said that at this point, a year had gone by, so I'll go ahead and move it. You know, a year ago, I wasn't excited about moving it. I'll go ahead and move it the feet you want me to move it. And I'll also then submit whatever you need information. Apparently what I submitted a year ago wasn't a proper format or something. So resubmitted that with a great deal of detail and nothing. And nothing has happened. It's been silence. And, you know, there's some great people I've worked with in the planning area. And it's not anything personal whatsoever. I may be saying this wrong. Annika,
Yeah.
wonderful person, and she's been very helpful. So again, it's nothing personal. It's not about her or anybody else. I only have respect for everybody. It's more about the frustration of waiting a year to tell me this, and then holding the permit or not approving the permit for a small interior revision, which has zero to do with the outside. So I'm doing everything I can to provide the information. I think I've actually gone above and beyond. I think our methods for making sure nothing goes into the sewer system, again, we're willing to spend thousands of dollars to make sure this is done right, because again, we're all about responsibility for not only the city, the environment, health, safety, everybody's. So again, it's just an awareness what's going on, not necessarily a complaint. I'm sure we'll get through this, but as a small business, it does hurt. It does hurt small businesses because it doesn't allow us to do the things we need to do to serve our clients. We're kind of at a standstill, a holding pattern. And that's basically it. I just appreciate the opportunity to come up here and talk.
Thank you for providing. We'll get. I know obviously if you've been through the process, we have your contact information, so we'll follow up with staff and try to get a response back. So.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else like to address the council on something not a part of tonight's agenda? All right. Seeing none, then we will move on. Item 5 is the adoption of the minutes. Item 5.1 would be from the November 4 meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Kroll,
Second.
second by Bodie. Discussion. Please vote. That passes. Item 5.2 is from the November 12 lunch and learn.
Motion to approve lunch and learn minutes.
Motion by Rosendahl, second by McBurney. Discussion. Please vote. That passes. Item 6 is the consent agenda. There are 17 items on there for approval. Motion by McBurney,
Second.
second by Rosendahl. Discussion, please vote. That item passes. All right, item 7 is public hearings. We do have one public hearing, and I know there's been a request to table this, but I believe we will open the public hearing tonight and have Steve's introduction, and then I believe the applicant would want to make a point as well and some statements, and then we'll entertain the motion to table that after that. So with that, the public hearing, or the public notice for this was published in the, I have to look here, see where it was. The November 1, 2024 Des Moines Register. Ask any objections to that notice is published.
There were none.
Is there a motion to open this public hearing?
So move.
Motion by Bodie,
Second.
second by Kroll. Discussion, please vote. That passes. And then to introduce the items, our Community Development Director, Steve Franklin. Steve?
Thank you. Good evening. So this is an item that started back a while ago now, and initially came to you, and it was a request to amend the comprehensive plan to allow the Sikh Association to build a facility at 11,000 Douglas. That came before the council. The council appropriately, in my opinion, referred it back to Planning and Zoning Commission, which is our typical process. Planning and Zoning Commission did hear it on October 14th. And then the next step was to bring it before council. So, you know, obviously you can see from reading the P&Z minutes and from the staff report that neither the commission nor staff felt that that particular action was in any way appropriate. And so, you know, as we move toward this public hearing tonight, we were trying to figure out some ways that, you know, we could maybe not go down this road. And so I know that city attorney reached out to the attorney for the Sikh Association and just had a conversation about, hey, this is going down a road of being adversarial and contentious, and we'd really not like to do that. Can we work together to try to figure something out? And the indication from the attorney was, yeah, we don't really want to do that, but there weren't really any solutions being suggested. So as we sometimes do, part of our role as staff is to try to find a solution if there is a solution. I mean, sometimes people come to us and they want to do something in a certain location, and the answer just has to be no for a variety of reasons. In this particular case, I had my staff do a little bit of research about, you know, where are some of the other communities these days on doing churches, religious organizations. And, you know, we can tell partly from the language, because in the code right now, the term that we're using is, quote, churches and other religious organizations. Well, that kind of sounds like a term from the, like, maybe 50s or something, because it probably is. And Pat, I think one of your questions was, you know, we don't, with today's code, we don't allow churches in commercially zoned parcels. And why is that? Well, the honest answer is, I don't know. It's probably because we're dealing with a zoning code that was written 40 or 50 years ago, and it's just been kind of carried to this point. So I had my staff do a little bit of research real quick, and it seems pretty clear that many, if not all, of the surrounding communities do have opportunities for churches to be in essentially all zoning districts. There may be one here or there where maybe it still requires a conditional use permit. There may be other districts where it can be done by right. And so Maria and I talked, and we said, look, how about I go back and I just suggest a different pathway here that can maybe solve a problem. And so we did have a conversation with the attorney and said, look, what makes sense to do here is let's just stop this action, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't get us where we need to be, and frankly is inappropriate. Let's rather go down a pathway of amending the zoning code that we can then bring forward to P&Z and then to you as council, and kind of make an argument about why, you know, the fact of the matter is the way church is done today compared to 30, 40 years ago is just different. And so, as with many things in our zoning code, we've recently updated our parking ratios because those needed to be updated. We're working on ADUs, and we're going to be having a lunch and learn session with you very quickly to present what some of those opportunities look like, so we can update the code with respect to that. And this is just one more item on the list where we just need to bring the code up to current standards. So what we agreed to do is take a request to just table this current action tonight. Could have been withdrawn. Either tabling it would be fine. And then we have already started a new process to amend the zoning code at their request. We've already published for a public hearing to be held on December 9th before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then it would come to council on January 7th. And we'll obviously prepare a staff report and give you all of our brief research into other cities and what they're allowing, and how this might be an opportunity for Urbandale to kind of adjust our code as well to kind of bring it up to what current standards and expectations would be. So in a nutshell, that is the issue.
All
I'd be
right.
happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Steve at this point?
I just want to say I appreciate, I mean, this feels like a really good way to go forward, and it feels like a really collaborative way to go forward, so I really appreciate
think,
it.
like I said, if there's a way to get there, we're always trying to find a way to do that. Sometimes we just can't. I think this is an opportunity maybe where we could.
Thank you.
So Steve, you said that what we're going to be working towards is amending the zoning code as opposed to doing a conditional use permit. Isn't a conditional use permit already allowed?
Yeah, so what we might do, and that's part of the rub here, you know, there's different languages, and really what it boils down to today is the case that we're making, and Planning and Zoning Commission agreed, the zoning code doesn't allow what they want to do in a CH district. So what we're probably going to recommend, we need to do a little bit more research, but we're probably going to recommend allowing churches in any zoning district. Some of them may be by right. There may be a couple, say, in our industrial districts, or maybe a couple where we would still want it to be a conditional use permit from the board, because what that does is it allows the board to analyze the specifics of the situation. Like, it's going to be on this property, this is who some of your neighbors would be, and just see if it really is appropriate. So that's probably what we're moving toward, is to allow them in any district. Maybe there's still a couple where we'd recommend that a CUP would still be, you know, the process to go. And you all could certainly weigh that when we bring it to you and see if you believe that that's appropriate or not.
Yeah, I just think in this case, anything that we can do to get it moving and hopefully get it resolved as quickly as possible.
Yep, exactly. And that's why we kind of, you know, we kind of fast-tracked this schedule a little bit, the best that we could, and that's why it will be back before you on January 7th. So we'll do it as quick as we can.
Appreciate that, Steve. Thank you.
Any further comments?
Yeah, I appreciate that we were able to find a path forward for this. I guess when you come back to us and when you go to the P&Z, I'd like to see more discussion related to if it does have to go to the zoning board of adjustment, like, because that's totally out of our hands.
Right.
In what cases and why could they deny it? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not talking about this, but it, you know,
Sure.
in a religious use in that has to go to them, what would be reasons that they could deny it? I'd like to have a thorough explanation.
Absolutely.
Because if we do authorize it to go to the Board of Adjustment, we've kind of taken any role that we have in the process away. And I
Correct.
want to understand really what that means.
Yeah, we can certainly run through what those criteria are. There's a list of about 7 or 8 things that it needs to be compliant with. And honestly, it would be a very unique situation where the board would be in a position to not approve it. The biggest rub, as I mentioned right now, is that based on the current language in the zoning code, it just doesn't allow this use in this location. So with the process that we're now embarking on would take care of that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Any further comments? All right, and I'm going to recognize, I know the applicant, I'm not sure who wants to speak, but I'll recognize somebody from the Sikhs if they'd like to make a point. So.
Good evening, everyone. Baldeep Dhingra from Platinum Realty, address being 6150 Village View Drive, West Des Moines, Iowa 50026. I would just like to give thanks on the behalf of the Iowa Sikh community to Steve Franklin, the city attorney, to the mayor and everyone on the city council for helping us throughout this whole process. We're just so grateful, you know, we could find a path going forward. Regarding the tabling, the Sikh community, you know, with talking to Steve and our attorney, we would like to, you know, proceed forward from December 9th meeting and the January 7th meeting. So we agree with that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, then, Steve, do you want a motion to table this to the January 7 meeting specifically, or just to table this?
I think, and Maria, correct me if you
No,
want to
we're
jump
not.
in here, but I think just table this action to amend the comprehensive plan in and of itself. And then the December meeting and the January meeting coming up is for a new action, which would be to amend the zoning code.
All right, but for this, we're going to keep the public hearing open. We're not going to close the public hearing tonight. We're going to keep this open and just table it until.
Maria, that's more of a question for you, I
Keep
guess.
this open, Maria, or not?
So it depends on if you want to take this up again. So if the intention is to take it up again, then you would table it, you would want to table it to a date certain. So it would be like a continuation of a public hearing that's essentially tabling it to a date certain. If you do not intend to take it up again, you wouldn't need to you'd table the action indefinitely, which essentially would mean it would need a new publication of notice of public hearing if it were to come before the council again.
So would it be wise, though, to keep our options open, to table this specifically to the January 7 meeting? And then by that time, if the other process is developed, then it then becomes moot, and we can just, if we know, I'm just trying to avoid republishing if we absolutely.
Right.
If
So
in that event, so if we have a motion to table till the January 7 meeting, but then if the other process takes shape, then by that time, this is moot.
I think that process makes sense if that's the goal.
All right.
Yeah, I would agree.
Only concern I'd have, Mayor, is if this comes before the planning and zoning items, I'd prefer to have, I assume that this would be under Section 8 for planning and zoning for the action that you're talking about, Steve, which would come after our public hearing. And I'd like to see if we could reverse those, so that way we could make a decision on the.
I understand, I understand your point, but I mean, if it's on, if the other one's on the agenda too, we can just, we would just dismiss the other one and then have action on the other item, the planning and zoning item. So I don't know if it matters what order they're on for that council
I
meeting.
think it does in my legal brain. Like, if the public hearing is before we take action on the zoning code amendment, we wouldn't, if something went crazy on the zoning code amendment, I mean, I think it would make sense to table it till the next meeting so that we can make sure that we take the action
could-
gets taken.
All right, we could table it to the second meeting in January.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes, I mean, I guess I'm on the same page as Larry, since we all read our new council procedural manuals and know which order things go in. We know that, I don't know, am I understanding that?
Maria, is there any component of it kind of just automatically would go away if they would approve this new action when it gets to them on January 7th?
No, a
Okay.
tabled item to a date certain won't automatically go away, but it doesn't have to be addressed.
Because it's to date certain, yeah.
So if we
Correct.
Table this to the January 21 meeting,
I think that makes sense.
that would resolve that issue. All right.
And they could withdraw it,
Correct, yeah, assuming that we take the other action January 7,
they could withdraw
they
it.
withdraw
for-
it.
Okay.
All right.
I just went to law school, guys, so feel free to ask for
You did-
advice.
I watched a few episodes of Suits, and that's about all I got, sorry, like, that's
Well,
all I got, man.
I can make a motion.
Since you went to law school. you
I
can
do,
go ahead.
seriously, today. I move to table Council Letter 7979 to the January 21st, 2025 meeting.
Second.
Motion by Carmen Montgomery, second by Kroll. Any further discussion? If not, please vote. All right, that passes. Again, I want to thank the Sikhs. Thank you very much for your patience and understanding on this. We will get through this issue, so thank you for this, and we are working on a process, so we appreciate your patience and working with us on this, so. Thank you very much. Did you say at a Holiday Inn Express?
I
last
did.
night, too?
Didn't I ask, I guess Curtis that
Yes,
yesterday.
Curtis that the other night. A couple of us actually went to law school.
I was always informed by former city attorneys never to make a pronouncement that I was a lawyer. For good reason. So some of me believe you.
All right, we will move on then to planning and zoning items. We have one planning and zoning item. It's item 8.1, the Spray Tech Fertilizers Building Addition Site Plan at 3255 99th Street. Steve?
Okay, this is a great project. This is to a reuse of a building. This is the old West Bank, located adjacent to the post office here at 100th Street. This is the building that you can see outlined here. You can see where the old drive-through lanes used to be, and what they're going to do is really just repurpose this. And let me go to the actual site plan drawings here so that you can see that. Here are the elevations for this. So what they're going to do is enclose the former drive-through canopy and then construct a little bit of an additional building that goes along with it. So they'll take the square footage of the building to from just over 3,000 square feet to just under 4,000 square feet. And then with the new parking ratios, the required parking that they would have to have goes from about 20 spaces down to about 14 spaces, and they're providing 18 spaces, so parking is taken care of. But again, just a great project to take a building that's been sitting there vacant for a couple of years, I think at this point, and convert it into office space for Spray Tech. So you can see here the elevations of what the building would look like. And then I think I also put the site plan in here. Yep, so here's the actual site plan. The dark color here is new pavement. The old parking spaces are kind of at an angle. It's kind of a funky layout, so they're going to take all that out and put some more some parking that really lines up better with what the building looks like. So you'd have parking here in the front for customers. You have a few parking spaces back here in the back for employees. And then you can see these real light dash lines here. That's where the drive-through lanes used to be. And so they're going to enclose that and then also just take the building a little bit farther north. So the new outline of the building would be this whole area here. Like I said, going from just over 3,000 square feet to just under 4,000 square feet to be able to do this. So Planning and Zoning Commission does recommend approval, subject to items noted. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Steve. Questions for Steve on this item? If not, is there a motion?
Motion to approve Council Letter 7973.
Motion by McBurney,
Second.
second by Rosendahl. Discussion, please vote. That passes. Moving on to regular agenda items versus item 9.1, and that's the 10841 Douglas Avenue Blight Remediation Project. To consider the assistance from Polk County and associated commitments, and to introduce this is our Assistant City Manager, Curtis Brown. Curtis?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. The item before you tonight is to consider and consider approval of a resolution associated with the former Econo Lodge property at 10841 Douglas. The city acquired this on September 5th. There will be in the CIP a proposed project for abatement and demolition of the property. And if approved, that would be soon after the first of the year to try to get the best bids we possibly can. The city has been in contact with Polk County throughout this acquisition process, and they have been helpful in locating reuse for furnishings from the former motel. So a good local regional partnership here. Polk County is considering assisting the city with a grant of $500,000 to be used for abatement and demolition of the property. And we've estimated at a very high level that the abatement of any environmental contaminants and demolition could total around $900,000. But again, we're really hoping that after designing the project and getting it out for bid after the first of the year, we could see an adjustment in that number. Can't guarantee it, but we're hopeful. So Polk County is assisting us with the understanding that Urbandale will ultimately use the property to advance affordable housing and to encourage coordinated delivery of human services in Urbandale. And in accepting that funding and making that commitment, the county asked the city to provide some commitment to the affordable housing and coordinated social services, and that has taken the form of the resolution before you tonight. And the resolution has several commitments within it. One, that will use that $500,000 for preparation for demolition and demolition of the structures. If somehow the demolition costs are less than $500,000, we could return the excess funds to the county, or in dialogue with them, how else to dispose of any excess funds. We will make our best efforts to utilize the property to accomplish the objective of the city's plans. And in the resolution, we talk about all the ways through the strategic plan, the comprehensive plan, the human services plan, and even our work with the Urbandale Food Pantry, how a site like this can really help to push those plans forward. And if we do develop the property for affordable housing and take proposals, that we would prioritize proposals that provide access to a coordinated range of social services. And then in some case, if the property was not used for affordable housing, that $500,000 we receive from the county would then be transferred over to the city's human services function within the budget over a period of 5 years. So that's a signal to Polk County that we won't just repurpose those funds for some other purpose that we have in mind, but really for human services in the community. So if approved by the Urbandale City Council tonight, then the Polk County Board of Supervisors would consider a companion resolution in December, which could contain additional provisions from the county once their staff and board develop a resolution. So we're going first. We will send the resolution to the county, then they will draft their resolution. But what we have tonight, this resolution, staff feels comfortable recommending to the council with regard to the county assistance at this time. One important note is because we can't guarantee to the county how everything plays out, whether development of the site or coordination of social services, we're making clear at the end of the resolution, we're accepting this for blight remediation, but in good faith to carry out the commitments in the resolution. Finally, just to note that the source of funding from the county is interest earnings on the emergency rental assistance funds that the county received from the U.S. Treasury. So the county has discretion on those funds and feels comfortable transferring those to us without strings attached other than those that the county and city really put on ourselves and on each other. Are there any questions that I can answer about this?
Any questions for Curtis?
Other than thank you
I just-
for
oh.
the work on this, and
Certainly.
it's good to have their partnership on this.
Absolutely.
I was gonna say the same thing. And thank you for your work and the rest of the team to pull this together. And I look forward to meeting all of these standards that are laid out in the agreement.
Absolutely. And it's, as any time a staff member comes up here, we might as well be bringing the entire city with us. It's been a huge team lift, not only in the city, but with other local governments as well. So we will send this to the county, assuming you approve it. And then as soon as we have a draft resolution back from what the county plans to approve and when, then we'll make sure that that comes through AJ out to the mayor and council.
All right. And give, I know we've met quite a few times with Sarah and Bob Brownell, but thank them as well for us as we move
Absolutely.
forward on this. I'm sure we'll see Bob one more time before he's done.
Here's hoping.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. With that, is there a motion?
Motion to approve Council Letter 7981.
Motion by Kroll,
Second.
second by Bodie. Discussion, please vote. That passes. Item 9.2 is consider the 28E agreement between Urbandale and Clive Fire Departments and the amendment to the Fire and EMS Services for Station 43 agreement. And to introduce this is our Fire Chief, Mike Cardwell. Chief?
Mayor, members of council, on Saturday, we are going to celebrate the tearing of the mortgage for Station 43, which is really a big tribute to the city to pay that off as quickly as we had. And it is a tribute to the partnership that we have developed with the city of Clive. And in honor of that occasion, we have pushed through updating the 28E agreement that partners Clive with Urbandale with regard to the staffing of Station 43. There are no real substantive changes to the agreement as was originally drafted 7 years ago, which I think is a really great thing. There's no changes in the funding mechanism. There's no changes in our staffing levels. There's no changes in any of the response agreements that we already have in place. You've already received a copy of it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
All right, thanks, Chief. Any questions for Chief? With that,
Make a motion to approve Council Letter 7968.
motion by McBurney,
Second.
second by Bodie. Discussion, please vote. And then that passes. And when we talk about efficiencies in local government, this is a true hallmark of doing
It
this,
is.
so.
And we are hoping to see all of you there on Saturday,
Yep.
so the mayor can rip the mortgage.
Push the truck.
Now we're gonna have a
in,
big,
And then we're gonna, well, that's the other part of the deal is that we are going to ceremonially sign the new 28E agreement between the two.
that's right.
It's officially not completely binding because I don't think they will accept the 2-foot by 3-foot cardboard signature down at the state, but we'll do what we can do.
All right. And then item 9.3 is consider the equipment purchase for the replacement ambulance. Chief?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we updated our equipment replacement plan. Getting ambulances has proven to be difficult. So even though we haven't received the 2 ambulances that we purchased 2.5 years ago, they are leaving the factory finally, so they're done. They're just on their way here. We do need to get the next one ordered so that we can get it slotted, and even there, they're already telling us it could be 2 to 2.5 years to get this one. So this is a similar models to one we've gone to, with recommendations from Fleet Services as to the chassis and the construction. It's going to be the same company. This is taking advantage of the HGAC, which is a purchasing compact that allows us to get the best possible price from a number of different vendors, and it's a national program that Urbandale has used with a lot of success to help keep down the costs as best we can with regard to some of our more major purchases. So total cost is about $394,000, a little bit under what we anticipated we were going to pay, and I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
Okay. Questions?
Motion to approve Council Letter 7967.
Okay. Motion by Kroll,
Second.
second by Rosendahl. Discussion, please vote. And that passes. All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing you Saturday.
See you on Saturday.
Item 9.4 is consider the City of Urbandale Council Rules of Procedure. I'm going to turn it over to City Clerk Nicole Wonders for any comments. Nicole, do you want to add anything beforehand?
Just happy to answer any questions.
These have all been distributed, so.
Appreciate the time for discussion. What's their
Council letter, where am I at? 7982.
Okay, motion by McBurney,
Second.
second by Rosendahl. Discussion, please vote. That passes. And item 9.5 is to consider the 2025 City Council meeting dates. Anybody want to meet next year or not?
Motion to approve
I'm not
Council
gonna be
Letter
here, so.
7965.
Motion by Rosendahl,
Second.
second by Bodie. Discussion, please vote.
Can I make a comment? I just wanted to thank you guys that did a very thorough look at the calendar to make sure that we are scheduling these on, or avoiding scheduling meetings on religious holidays. I think as we strive to be a more inclusive community, that is something that we really need to continue to do. And I know it probably took a lot of effort to make this calendar, but it doesn't go unnoticed, and I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you for that. Yes, it is true. We need to be cognizant of all of that. So, that we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please vote.
I didn't get a voting screen. I think I canceled it out.
would you like to?
I'd like to vote. Yes. Okay, I vote yes.
All right, that passes.
Oh,
So I assume the calendar invites will be coming out soon after that, right? All right, thank you. Thanks
give
for
us
all
some
that.
warning.
And item 9.6 is a discussion on the downtown Urbandale Master Plan, so I will turn it back over to Curtis to introduce this item.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Mayor and council members. Tonight is a very important update, and as our consultants get the presentation ready, I'll introduce them in a moment. But we're at about the 1/3 mark, approximately, in pulling together information and developing a plan for downtown Urbandale. I want to make sure that you know that internally, we have approached this from a team perspective. In community development, Steve Franklin, Christy Bales, and Annika Schilke have been working on this. From engineering, John Larson and Kristen Brostrom, Aaron DeYoung and Ebony Woods from economic development, Derek Zarn and Anna Steenson from communications, and myself have all been working on this as a team effort. And that is really scary, to make a list of names and hope that you didn't miss somebody, but I don't think we did. And so tonight, we're joined by Andrew Dresner from Bolton and Menk and Chris Brewer from AECom. Andrew Dresner heads up the project team at Bolton and Menk that's been leading the way. And then AECom is a well-respected economic consultant that multiple cities across central Iowa have used to analyze these redevelopment projects. So we are at a point where we have not made any decisions. I think that's very important to point out. No decisions have been made, but we are starting. It's like focusing a projector. The picture is starting to come into view a little bit here. And we want input from you tonight and really that affirmation. Are we on the right track or do we need adjustments? I'll also, to bookend their presentation, I want to share some of the early results from a survey we've released out to the community to get feedback on downtown Urbandale. So without further ado, Andrew and Chris.
Thank you, Curtis, and thank you very much for having us. Let's see, let me just get myself organized here. So Chris and I will endeavor to speak for about 20 minutes to give you an update on where we are, okay? So there's a lot of material in here. We'll try to get through it efficiently so we open up some time for conversation. Okay, first of all, just as a reminder, all this work is rooted and starts with the comprehensive plan, which was adopted a couple years ago. Comprehensive plan established a pretty broad and high-level vision for downtown, and it established about 15 or so important ideas for downtown. Our job in this project is to take those 15 or so ideas and to vet them through a lens of policy, economics, and design to deliver a more specific and more detailed master plan. One of our charges in this master plan that Curtis and staff gave us is to not come to the completion of the plan with recommendations for further study. So this is an action-oriented master plan. Okay. Just a word or two about the approach and how we think of this. First of all, I think I may have mentioned this last time I was here, but I think it's worthwhile stating that in the broad arc of the evolution of this area from what it is today to what it will be in tomorrow is one in which thinks of this area, Douglas Avenue, from 70th or so to 64th, transitioning from a place to pass through, which is really the way it is today, to a place to be within. Okay, so it will always be a road, an arterial road through the city, so there will always be some movement through it. But what we endeavor to do here in the master plan is to make it more of a place to stay within. And we do that through design, and we do that through good planning and supported by economics. And it's a balanced place. So the image that you see up here is really our approach in which we balance those issues of safety, mobility, community, economics, et cetera. Okay. So a couple diagrams here that describe how the area works today. First of all, there's a handful of businesses within the area. Many of them draw from throughout the region. So this is shown by the long blue lines. So such as Rieman's music store, Christian Photo. They're pulling people from all over the region, or at least half of the region. And generally people are coming and going and coming and going in terms of their long distance. We also learned that a lot of the local folks, the people who live in the area, don't patronize the businesses along the corridor a tremendous amount. A little bit, but not a tremendous amount. They're leaving the corridor quite a bit. So one of the things that we endeavor to do here is to think about the additional uses and places that can be created here that extend the stay for people coming from a long distance and give the opportunity for people locally to do many things on one trip to downtown, okay? So those uses and places might be specific types of businesses, they may be specific types of public spaces. But ultimately the idea is to stay. The idea is to do many things when you come downtown. The idea is to linger. So just a slide that shows a little bit comparison of the scale of downtown. So downtown's on the left, again, from about 72nd or so to 64th. And then a couple other areas that you're probably familiar with, Beaverdale and Valley Junction. Point here being is that this area is approximate in scale. And it's a great scale because it's one in which you can walk from end to end fairly easily, if it's designed well and it's comfortable. But distance-wise, it is your sort of your perfect downtown size. A couple other things, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris as it relates to the context. The residential fabric around downtown it's dense for Urbandale, but it's not particularly dense for the region. I think there's 7,300 or so people living within the half mile or so. But the market for development here doesn't just come from the residents that live within the area. It does also come from people driving through the street, which is about 15,000 people, but also comes from the cluster of schools that are in this area. So there's approximately 3,000 or 4,000 students that come daily, at least during school days, to this area. And with those students, of course, come some parents and, of course, staff. So I think that's one of the unique qualities of this part of Urbandale and something that the downtown can take advantage of. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk a little bit about some of the economic elements of the plan.
Thank you, Andrew. So again, looking at a slide like this, it reinforces this simple idea that obviously the eastern part of Urbandale is fundamentally very different, much more dense, older. So again, if we think about slightly lower average household incomes on the eastern side of town, we're making up for that with significantly more density. So we have more people per square mile. So again, from a retail standpoint, our fundamentals might actually look similar. The other point we would make is that inasmuch as the household mix on the east side is older, which means smaller household sizes, there's at least a hint in the data that suggests that we've had a shift to some renter occupancy in single family. We may have some younger households, smaller families moving in. But ultimately, we would say, given the concentration of schools in our neighborhood, that the small size of many of our houses is probably getting in the way of families with bigger families moving in. So again, the housing itself is a constraint on development. The one trend we've been paying close attention to in the neighborhood is the lack of housing turnover. So within the east side and specifically within the study area, the homes have been majority of the homes have been in owner occupancy for much longer than the rest of the city. The interesting trend, though, within that is the homes that have sold, they are much more likely to be sold to investors. So again, this is the one place in Urbandale where we have a large percentage of single-family homes in renter occupancy, and that trend is highly correlated along Douglas.
Can I interrupt you for just a second? I can't read what's in the green and yellow above the graph.
The green is the oldest, so prior to 1999.
Says moved in 1999 or earlier. What does the yellow say?
The yellow is about 2014 to 2017. We will get those graphics cleaned up the next time around. I apologize.
Thanks.
But again, it reinforces just a subtle trend of a different dynamic in play in the study area relative to the rest of the city, which I think is not a surprise, but something we have to pay attention to. So one of the things we start to think about if we start introducing new development is what are the benchmarks for what new apartments could look like. And I think the one thing we'll point out in Urbandale is that most of the new projects, they tend to be larger, so more than 150 units. They also will tend to have the amenities internalized within the building. So swimming pools, workout rooms, internal to the project. And when you look at our proposed project along Douglas, you will in fact see a lot of the amenities being pushed to the outside, more public open space amenities as opposed to within the building. But again, I think one of the points to make here is that rent that we're seeing for new construction, $1.70 to a square foot, which might end up being around $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 a month in terms of rent. So obviously market rate, but we know today, for example, single family homes for rent might actually renting for about $1.40 a square foot, which would be about a 1,200 square foot unit, get about $1,400 a month. So again, a surprising premium for the rented single family, which is one of the reasons why we see there's an opportunity for apartments in the corridor. Again, talking about year structure built, again, we know the older houses are smaller, fewer bedrooms, smaller families, so that lack of connectivity to our school constellation nearby. All things being equal, we would always say that if we have a school nearby, particularly an elementary school, that's actually supportive of real estate value. Like people like to be able to walk to school. So those sorts of things do factor into home values. And again, we talked about the rental occupancy. Again, the chart reinforces both the red box, which is our study area, and the blue box, which is the properties that roughly bound Douglas. The bottom line is the vast majority of rented single-family properties in all of Urbandale are on the east side, and a significant percentage of those are actually adjacent to the corridor. So again, it speaks to that investor interest in the study area. It's something we have to pay attention to because it speaks to more rapid turnover in terms of who's living in the area. But obviously the big thing, the single-family homes are renting at a premium to the existing apartments in the study area. So there's clearly a value appreciation. There's clearly a sense of value for that single-family property relative to the older apartments. Again, that's a key finding that starts to inform our thoughts about what the market could support in terms of new construction. We always talk about retail. I think the good news from a retail standpoint is that we do think there are targeted opportunities for retail along the corridor, not large in scale. And in this case, we're saying maybe about 50,000 square feet of demand. Could be a little more, a little less. Again, part of that is a reflection of the loss of retail space at the Merle Hay Mall. Again, that used to be a much larger property. We're no longer talking about the retail apocalypse, but we are talking about a targeted mix of new retailers. Again, potentially more of an e-commerce play, but we could also be thinking about service uses, healthcare uses, could also potentially play a role in this conversation. Not pure retail, but again, maybe ability to pay a slightly higher rent, if that makes sense. Back to transportation.
Thank you very much. Just more if you'd like, Chris. Okay, so thank you, Chris. We'll talk a little bit now about transportation, about the roadway, and about development patterns. So after the school year started, we updated our traffic counts along the corridor, and you can see those numbers in orange. Okay, so those are the current 2024 traffic counts for each block, and you can see they range from pretty close to 15,000 down to about 12,000 or thereabouts. And if you look quickly, you can compare them to the blue numbers, which were taken in 2016, and you can see that the numbers have actually dropped, curiously. Now, intuitively one thinks that traffic always goes up, but in fact what we know nationally is that vehicle miles traveled is actually going down. So that's one of the reasons. So in some ways this isn't super surprising. But there are other reasons as to why the numbers have gone down a bit. The closure of the big box stores at the mall is probably one of the reasons. Generally, the changing retail patterns, and this is a big one, the increase of people just simply working from home, okay? So what's important here is that the drop in volume, it's not an enormous drop, but it's a drop in volume, opens up some opportunity for how we design the future street, okay? Chris mentioned, he touched on the idea about apartments. The amenities likely for these apartments are going to be more of the outside than the inside. So as we redesign the street, we can think of it as much more than just simply a new street. We can think of it as amenity for everyone coming into this area.
Quick question on the transportation.
Sure.
Is based on these numbers, I know we've had a lot of construction on Douglas. Is that, do you think that's, I mean, I'm sure the numbers are down, but do you think that played a role in any of that?
I don't know. We did these after it was closed, of course, so we didn't do it during then, but it could be. I'm not really sure. I'm just taking the numbers for what they are. Maybe some people during construction bump around and seem pleased with their new route. Who knows? I don't know if John, do you?
I would agree.
Yeah.
I don't think the construction had a lot to do with the counts.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about cycling, bicycles, and Curtis will touch on this also from the survey. We think for downtown to be successful, it has to be bike friendly. Okay, so when we think about downtown, the basic approach that we suggest we take is you can get to downtown by bicycle, but then you dock your bike and then you walk. Okay, the reason for that is that we have space restrictions on Douglas Avenue. We want to make sure we have a really good sidewalk. We don't want to compromise the sidewalk with a cycle track or bike lanes on the sidewalk. So there are ways, when you look at the bigger picture, to move east and west throughout the city and into Des Moines on parallel streets, whether they're Aurora or to the south. So our recommendation, or at least what's coming into focus, is this idea of making it very easy to get to downtown, providing really good amenities and safe places to park your bike, and then enjoy a really good sidewalk. So this diagram looks at the basic kind of overall development framework. And there are, if you can think of it in 3 different layers. There's oranges, there's blues, and there's greens. So oranges and reds and yellows are basically the development layer of the downtown. The blue is the transportation layer, and green is the open space. So in general, we're looking at a development pattern that has 2 nodes, a large one and a small one. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Surrounded by housing in yellow to the north and south, and I'll talk a little bit about that and some ideas for that. In terms of transportation, we will be focusing in both on ways to get to the corridor through by bicycles, as well as the design of Douglas Avenue as well. And then in terms of open space, we'll be looking at, we consider the sidewalk an open space. We'll be looking at closing the ends of some streets to create plazas and shared amenities, as well as a system of open space for the large block on the northwest corner of 70th and Douglas, because that corner, that block is sort of different from all the others. In terms of the development models, we sort of, the way we always do our work is we explore outside, we explore outside ideas and then eventually end up with a hybrid idea. So the idea of a great avenue, the idea of a series of small nodes, and then also the idea of a single large node. And where we are emerging is really a hybrid of all 3 ideas. In terms of the development models, we are looking at the idea of mixed use primarily, which means retail on the ground floor with housing above, or housing only models. Generally, excuse me, and then also we will be looking at new models for housing north and south of the corridor in the neighborhood, from Oliver Smith down to, I forgot the block south of Douglas. In terms of the development models along the corridor, we think they'll come in a variety of different shapes and sizes. Essentially, we'll be looking at a depth of about 180 or 200 feet from the corridor, and models that are both full block face as well as partial block face. And the reason for that is because the property sizes are irregular. So it all depends on how property sizes come together and how developers acquire properties and how individual property owners develop their properties. Essentially, a block face can handle in the range of about 100 units in 3, 4, and 5 stories above, plus or minus, and about 10 or 15,000 square feet of retail on the ground floor. That can all be handled within a single block face. A little bit less if it's 2 separate buildings or 3 buildings. But so that's an approximate. And there are pluses and minuses, pros and cons of all these different models. Frankly, over time, and we're looking at a 20 to 30 year period, it's going to be a mix of all of these, which is actually a good thing to have that mix. That kind of variety is good for a downtown. So a little bit about what we call the big node, which is the big corner at the northwest of 70th and Douglas. That property actually has that block has a series of relatively large properties. What we're recommending is an approach to the public realm, and the public realm is, by the way, just another word for the amenities that we were talking about before. So the approach for the public amenities is one, we call it a nook and cranny approach. And we call it that because we think it'll come together over time. It won't be a highly structured, highly scripted type of public realm. It'll be connected, but it'll come into existence incrementally, organically over time. There is a coordination role for the city in doing this, however, in order for it to be a connected system. Chances are this will play out in early phases, which will be larger developments on the larger properties, and over time filling in with the smaller properties. And that's actually possibly the opposite of the rest of the corridor, because the rest of the corridor, chances are, is going to start with small projects and then grow to larger projects as value is built. So when we talked a little bit of the large node at the corner. I'll talk a little bit about the idea of a small node. And this can occur straddling 68th Street or 67th Street. The diagram on the left is looking straight down, and the diagram on the right starts to pop up 3 dimensions. But basically, the idea is that we close off select street ends, residential street ends, and we turn that space into a shared amenity. That shared amenity can be used for kind of patio spill out. It can be used for a little bit of green space. It can be used for public art. It can be used for some light gathering. In addition, the 4 corners around it are redeveloped in one of those models I described before, either half block or quarter block sort of increments. The other thing that's nice about this system is that we close the street off, and then we provide a rear lane behind these buildings. And this rear lane is where the 4 quadrants of the block receive their parking, so they don't receive it off the residential street. I'll get into this a little bit later, but we're also looking at modifying Douglas Avenue so that it has possibly 3 lanes of traffic with on-street parking. This sort of basic composition of open space, development patterns, and transportation, we think can come together to create a really good, humane, intimate type of place where people exist on the sidewalk. They're visible from passerbys. It's comfortable. It's a humane type environment that can accommodate a range of different businesses as well as a range of different housing. I'm going to turn over to Chris a little bit here to talk about some of the feasibility of this model.
So, based on our experience, anytime we talk about developers, some of them are very patient in terms of their capital. They're willing to wait a longer period of time for their return. Other developers are very impatient. They want to build the property, bring it to occupancy, and sell it as soon as possible. We obviously can't predict exactly who our developers will be, but we wanted to try and give you a framework for relationships between construction cost, supportable rents, and how those ultimately yield a set of options for what we call yield on cost, which is one way of thinking about development profitability. So we're talking about a specific hurdle rate here. We're looking for projects that get to a 6% rate of return to the developer. So that's generally anything that you see in a green shade. So what we're trying to show you is there are combinations of construction costs per square foot across what is a 100-unit apartment building with about 10,000 square feet of retail space. But what you're seeing is that there are a number of pathways to get to feasible projects. And I would stress at this point that you actually control one of the key elements of feasibility, which is the more you can deliver in a transparent entitlement process, you reduce developer entitlement risk, you give them clarity about their development program and their level of density. That's actually an incentive to facilitate development. So being transparent about how we do that is one of the things we want to ultimately have as an outcome of this process. But the key takeaway here is that there are pathways. Again, we're heading into a world where construction costs are going to normalize relative to rents. So again, we see a set of pathways that are ultimately supportive to the project from a private sector standpoint. We do have a set of key findings. I think I've gone through most of these already in the study, but again, just reinforcing the unique nature of the study area on the east side. Again, the concentration of homes in renter occupancy that are renting at a premium to old apartments. The idea that we do see a path to market rate rentals in the corridor. Again, subject to this question of how do we deliver the open space requirement, key element. But then ultimately we also see a strategy for a retail component. I don't think it is going to be large, but we do see opportunities for targeted retail, whether it's cafes, obviously medical office, sort of non-traditional retail uses would be totally appropriate in that mix as well.
Thank you, Chris. Let's bounce back to Douglas Avenue because I know that's a topic of a lot of interest and concern. So if you think back to the little node drawing that I had, I suggested the idea of a 3-lane road. This is one possibility, okay? Given the reduction in traffic that I showed earlier on Douglas Avenue, given the need to create public infrastructure that is also an amenity to incentivize development, and also given the scale of the development that we're going to have here, we think a reasonable possibility would be to look at a 3-lane section that might look something like this, whereby the center lane is a left turn lane. And what's shown here is one of the cross streets that might be closed off with a bump out that allows for easy pedestrian crossing of the sidewalk. If we put that into a little sketch on top of it, this roughly, I mean, this is just a simple sketch, but it roughly represents the scale of development to the left and the right, as well as the scale of the street in the foreground. It's not a fully rendered drawing, but it starts to give an idea about the scale and the character of a future part of downtown Urbandale. I'm going to flip past there and go right to a couple other items regarding Douglas Avenue. In general, we suggest that Douglas Avenue, if at all possible, should have some on-street parking, because that provides access to businesses that will be facing Douglas Avenue. In general, we like to see, we would aspire to get to a point where we have 15-foot sidewalks, or at least let's think of it as 15 feet as the dimension from the curb to the front of the building. That's a really good dimension because it gives space along the curb for the trees and signage, and it gives space in front of the buildings for some tables or for a small dining patio. We certainly would have no objection to buildings that step back 5 more feet to get a little bit more dining space. We have a saying in our business, people like to be where they see people. If you see people, you want to be there, so let's put people out there in a visible place. So this is what you see on the top is the existing Douglas Avenue, 4 lanes. What you see on the bottom is the possibility of a 3-lane section. And again, what we're after is a humane, intimate place where you can see your neighbors across the street, or it's comfortable to cross your street to say hello. Parking will always comes up in every single project I've ever worked on. And like, as what I said before, we pushed and we explored sort of out all 3 ideas, but at the end of the day, downtown Urbandale is going to have a blend of this, or we would recommend it that have a blend. On-street parking, as well as some shared lots, as well as access to the back sides of buildings on Douglas Avenue, particularly for residential. Again, in terms of public space approach, we explored all 4 of these ideas and some precedents. I mentioned earlier that we're sort of honing in on the nook and cranny idea. We're honing in on that idea as well as a great sidewalk. But the main reason for that, for a nook and cranny approach, is that there's such irregularity here. It's hard to make a single sweeping large move, with the exception of course, a nice consistent sidewalk. And then finally, this might be our final substantive topic. When we look behind the corridor into the residential neighborhoods, we'll be looking at an approach to gentle redevelopment. We use the term gentle density. You may have heard the term missing middle. The idea that single-family lots can work a little bit harder, whether it's with ADUs, which I think is going to be a topic that comes up with you, or with smaller townhouses, or with duplexes or triplexes. One approach to doing this might be to say, maintain your existing front and rear setbacks so that you maintain that consistency, but change what's allowed in between there. Permit maybe different building types, maybe triplexes, maybe fourplexes, maybe townhouses. Building forms that, as long as we maintain that front and that back setback, don't disrupt the existing patterns of the neighborhood. So this is just an illustration that looks out, maybe 20, 30 years. It's sort of a full build out. It won't look exactly like this by any stretch of the imagination. However, you can see some of the hopefully you can see some of the models that I described earlier starting to populate the area here. This is, as I mentioned, it's 20, 30 years out. It'll start small. Maybe it'll start here. Maybe it'll start on one block. But it'll start small and then it'll come into play over time. Of course, it'll start with Douglas Avenue. That's really the first phase of the project. So overall, there's a approach that looks at these 5 or 6 areas. One in which Douglas Avenue is probably the earliest phase work. That's the streetscape and the public realm work. I talked about the large node on the big block, a certain approach to that. I talked about identifying a small node, a corner along the corridor. Everything else is sort of over time and in a sense an act of patience. I'm going to turn it to Chris here, and then I'll close it up in just a second.
So just for perspective on projects like this, we always want to remind people that it's really about how we use public infrastructure to encourage and leverage private investment. So, if we're talking about sort of rules of thumb, for every $1 of public investment, we'd want to achieve at least $4 of private, but ideally up to $8 of private investment. So if we think about a phase 1 project that might be 300 units, that might be about $100 million in private investment. So you might say, well, the appropriate investment on the public side might be 5 to 10 million in terms of just public dollar leveraging private dollars. But obviously over the entirety of the build-out, which maybe that's up to 800 housing units, again, $280 million, over time you might want to pay more to get the outcomes that drive the change you're looking for. So what we're ultimately stressing here is just simply our intention is to be intentional, where we're using our public dollars to encourage private investment in the corridor.
And one of our next steps is to start to bring those numbers that Chris just mentioned, start to calibrate those numbers. So Curtis talked about sort of slowly bringing this into focus. As we do that, these are the 8 or so points that I would like to leave you with. First of all, downtown could include multi-story mixed-use development, 3, 4, 5 stories. Changes to the section of Douglas Avenue. I talked about the curbs moving and creating a more humane place. A development pattern that has both a large node at 70th and Douglas, as well as a smaller node along the corridor. The idea of possible closure of end blocks to create the ends of those residential streets to create those shared amenities. Additional housing units in the surrounding areas through gentle density or missing the middle. A requirement for city investment. Chris just talked about that in terms of capital infrastructure as well as incentives. And then most likely, well, not most likely, for certain we'll be recommending regulatory changes to make this all happen. Because right now, it can't all happen, and that's why you do the plan. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over.
No, you can take questions.
Okay, yeah, take questions about anything that we talked about or anything we didn't talk about, for that matter.
I think we should just definitely call it bike lanes and get everybody all excited. They're on Douglas. No. I think this is a lot of really good information. If you came to our meetings on a regular basis, I always talk about DART and public transit because that's my job, I feel like. So I guess moving forward, I guess if you could somehow figure out, I think, we've heard from the community that we want more transit within Urbandale, and I think this would be where people would want to go. And so, I don't know, keep that on top of mind and figure out, because DART wants to hear what we want more than just saying we want more. If we can say we want, some sort of route that connects this to this or has more frequency along Douglas, I know this area is included in our DART on demand, and this Merle Hay Mall and the food pantry are two of the primary locations for people to use the DART on demand in this area. So I just like, as you continue to refine this, if there's ways that you can talk about transit, that would be helpful in us trying to reach some of those goals we have of getting more service or better service, I guess, in Urbandale.
Thank you for bringing that up, and I apologize for not having spoken about it, but I think it's a really good point. And just, I think a related point to that is, you'll find the developer community wants transit here. If for no other reason, it allows them to build less parking, which is all good for everyone. And of course, we'll also find that the transit agency, the DART, will like to see a lot of rooftops because that's where their riders come from. So there's absolutely a synergy here between the downtown plan and transit.
Thank you.
As I look at this, I'm wondering, as we move forward or not with the Aurora Complete Streets, if that is going to impact traffic flows on Douglas, and if that would warrant a concern for taking Douglas down to 3 lanes. And so that's just a thought that's going through my head, is we should make sure that we don't inadvertently pinch ourselves with those. And that leads into what's the timeline for potential change that would come. So.
And I don't know everything about Aurora, but it's going from 4 to 3. Is that, and
theoretically
it'll have bike lanes, or that's the idea. So often I hear, it comes up a lot, the concern of constricting and therefore bumping traffic somewhere else. We hear that a lot. What we find, though, in reality is 3-lane road doesn't reduce volumes hardly at all, in part because it may be slightly slower, but it's a lot more sane of a place to be. And people will trade off a few seconds for a little bit of peace. And a 3-lane road generally is I'll call it a peaceful road, because you don't have the weaving, right? And the mood of the road's not dictated by that one weaver, because you cannot have a weaver. So what we find is people actually will trade off a couple seconds for the fact that it's a more calm drive.
Sure, that makes sense. And then my other question in your numbers related to rentals, one of the foci of our city council is affordable housing. And so how does that factor in? Can we create affordable housing, or at least some of those units to be affordable, without dipping into that below 6% return on investment ratio that you talked about?
So a lot of cities right now are having policy struggles over affordable housing. There's definitely a shortage of housing at this moment across the board. So I think the policy debate boils down to an extent of what are these set of public policy goals you want to achieve. Ultimately, the developer is not going to be able to deliver on all of them. So it's, to an extent, how do we make different choices based on the phase? Maybe some phases are more aligned towards public improvements. Maybe other phases are more aligned towards provision of workforce housing or truly affordable housing. Again, most of the strategies we see nationally try to encourage actual mixed income housing, like true mixed income districts. And that's where I think, again, the transit piece becomes so important. If you have zero-car households, the ability to drive a transit solution becomes yet another incentive to help make that achievable. To me, I would say there's an argument that we just need to build more housing as a step one. But also there's a fundamental affordable component that we can't ignore. So, yeah. But I think it reflects choices you have to make.
So I'm hearing yes, that's a possibility. Yeah. Great.
specifically when we're talking about bringing Douglas down in lanes, I drive on Douglas west of this area quite a bit, and it's a mix of 45 and 35 mile per hour limits. So I guess I'm not coming off at the top of my head what specifically is east of here. But I'm assuming we would be thinking as part of this as making it so that it's around 25 or so through that area as well if we're reducing lanes too.
Of course, posted speed is different from what is.
Right.
But designing for 25 miles an hour is appropriate for, in my opinion, appropriate for a downtown area. You know, just that again, when you're relying on your street to be your amenity, that's a factor.
Well, I think even the Beaverdale area is 30 miles an hour. So that's kind of what we're equating it to. I think right now it's 30, right?
On Douglas?
On Douglas.
Oh.
It's 35, 40,
Is it
45.
35?
It depends where you
Or
are.
Raleigh Mall, is it 35 too?
35.
35.
Okay.
What's the speed limit on Douglas?
Isn't it 35?
It depends where you're at.
I thought it went 30, 35, 45. Yeah.
I mean, there is nothing that high to the east.
Yeah.
And again, I know we're going through a stretch of 30 again.
Okay.
One other point on speed that might be worthwhile bringing up. There's sometimes a misconception that slower speeds choke things down. When slower speeds allow cars actually to drive closer to each other, and the distance, this gets a little wonky, but the distance at which they separate is exponential as it relates to the speed increase. So slower speeds can, I'm not saying it can move more cars, but the distance, I don't know exactly what it's called, but the distance between cars is less, so the throughput is still pretty decent, I guess is the way to put it.
Also feels steadier.
Pardon me?
It also feels steadier.
Yeah,
because,
feels steadier.
Yeah.
And by the way, the accidents that occur, that's another issue, of course. Safety, and the likelihood of surviving, for a pedestrian surviving an accident at 30 miles an hour is exponentially lower than like 25 miles an hour. It's not just a little bit lower, so.
You said that it was really critically important for downtown to make it bike-friendly. Can you tell us why?
I would say simply getting to downtown for as many people as possible, for people who choose to bike there, as well as people who choose to walk there. It also allows people to own one car living within downtown. So I think there are simply a variety of reasons. I think downtown could become a very family-friendly type place. It could be the kind of place where people come after school. A lot of people get to school by bike. So to me, there are layers of reasons why it should be bike-friendly. But bike-friendly doesn't necessarily mean, in our opinion, it doesn't necessarily, to us, bike-friendly is about getting to the place by bike. It's not necessarily passing through the place by bike. So.
Got it. And then you mentioned, in addition to our investment, that there were regulatory pieces that we should or could be doing that would help this. Can you give us some examples of that?
Sure. Well, we talked earlier today, stormwater will be one of them. That's going to be a tough one. Zoning will be another one. In particular, building height issues, density issues, setback issues, stuff that guides the built form will certainly be important. Recommendations for those will definitely be important.
Okay, thanks.
When we're talking going back to bikes, I think when you had it up where there wasn't necessarily going to be bike lanes through, but it was more of a like, let's get people there and then they'll walk. It looked like there was just 2 dots, like one on either side. Is there, I'd also encourage
See if we can find it.
having some sort of accommodation from the top and bottom as well, just to make sure, yeah, like, because there's, you know, a lot of neighborhood streets too. Like if you're getting people just on one end or the other, we had that concept of the blocked off area. Like those are really good entry points for people to get there and hop off, and then you're already in the mix of it too.
Yeah.
So
I agree with you.
One thing I noticed, it was towards the end, I think your drawing concept of the space as a whole, you had single-family homes essentially wedged in between what seemed to be larger buildings. Yeah, right here.
This
so
here?
up, next one.
This one?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, you had that line of single-family properties that would be kind of wedged in between larger buildings. I just no, more to your left, 2 blocks to your left. So where the gray buildings are at, yeah.
Okay.
I just worry about having. I just worry about those homeowners in particular, just because depending on the size of the building, it could impact, you know, visibility for sunlight and, you know, other things like that. So when you talk about policy, is that what you're also taking into consideration, is looking at instances like that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we often will talk about how larger buildings need to transition on their backside so that they're not so ominous to the smaller buildings behind them.
Okay.
And the other point I would make is a number of these single-family houses are in rental occupancy.
Yes.
So their ability to change quickly, we can't forget.
Right.
And that's where I think, again, as you pursue this project, there will be ripple effects, and that's where we have to be mindful of what are the zoning implications for single family, which allow us to maybe go to a townhome, a row house, like what are the strategies to manage infill in general? Because again, the strategy assumes that will eventually unfold.
And then on that last slide, I think this kind of highlights where I feel like we have the most difficulty, actually on the very last slide, so like your cover slide or whatever, that second business, or yeah, that second picture on the top row. I feel like this is a perfect example of what I feel as though is a property that is going to be resistant to change. So is this where you're talking about potential capital coming into play from the city's perspective?
Well, so that particular, I guess the short answer is not necessarily.
Okay.
Like, if that property owner is, and our actual understanding is, it's not resistant to change and would like to improve the building, improve his property. And the owner here owns next to him as well. So, and adaptive reuse is great. You know, not everything needs to be a 4 or 5 story building, 3, 4, 5 story building.
Right.
And this building happens to, in fact, it has Stormy's is in it, which is, I don't know if we can call it a neighborhood institution. I guess I was told it was the oldest business in Urban.
I would say it's a neighborhood institution.
So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the juxtaposition of old next to new is what people like. You know, that makes people are comfortable with that. It's part of creating maintaining institutions like that are part of creating identity to a place. So, so this is one particular block, one particular property where I could see it improving, but you know, if not necessarily
going up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the strategy would more tend to focus on buildings in commercial use where the rents are not keeping up, the buildings are falling behind, buildings aren't occupiable, or where the tenant quality keeps slipping. That's where we're seeing that bigger concern about, you know, some strategies to revisit how the neighborhood plays out.
I only chuckle because we've already been dealing with some of that, so with one particular Douglas.
I've just got one, I think it's kind of a quick question probably, but you had one of these diagrams where you were showing different options and models, and one had a gathering place, or it appeared to be a gathering place of some substance, like off on the west end. And that ended up not being where you landed, and I was just kind of wondering why.
I think you are possibly referring to this.
Yes, square or plaza, thank you,
Yeah,
that's what I was.
Probably referring to that. So that, it's a great idea. It's a big public lift.
Okay.
And our opinion is that when we think about how that big block will come into play, that a more connected internal, we call it nook and cranny approach, is more feasible for that area.
Okay.
I think that, you see that and you can think of what I'd like to gather in there. Those functions can, and those activities can occur in a series of different ways. But this is a sort of a signature square, signature plaza. It requires a real significant public lift and would, in a sense, compete with the public lift of rebuilding the street as well. Or not compete, but it would increase the lift.
Okay.
I had a question about the residential involvement in this process. Because I could see, if they were not being engaged, a reigniting of the Downtown Urbandale Neighborhood Association fighting us, that we're coming in and doing all of this stuff to them.
Thank you, Councilmember. That is like a perfect transition.
Okay.
As if we planned it. Anything else for the consultants? Great. We know there's more on the agenda here, but did want to share what's been going on in terms of getting feedback. So we sent a survey out to the entire community, did a special send of our newsletter list, which has approximately 4,000 people on it. Then we sent postcards to every door in the study area. And they were also invited to take the survey and to join the newsletter list for more updates. So Anna from Communications pulled a report today, and I wanted to share just a few bullet points. But as of today, we had 455 responses, which is really good. Immediately, we had about 300, and then after the postcard send, another 150. Of those, almost 200 people asked to be on the update list for what's going on. So we will definitely make sure that area stays involved. We've also, and by we, I mean economic development, has been coordinating monthly meetings of the downtown stakeholders. So Chris and Andrew will do this presentation tomorrow morning at the library to the downtown Urbandale stakeholders as well. So we're really trying to make sure that there are plentiful opportunities to be involved. A few highlights from this, and Councilmember Carberry Montgomery, I'll share right away. We asked people, how do you travel now in downtown Urbandale? 2 people said bus. We asked, how would you like to travel in downtown Urbandale? 32 people said bus. So 16x. So that's pretty good. I mean, okay, take the data for what it is, but there you go. A few neat things that came up. The future vision for downtown Urbandale, the top priorities were restaurants and coffee shops. New items were specialty retail and public spaces for recreation and socializing, which I think is really interesting that people would like to spend time down there. Transportation preferences, walkability and cycling options greatly increased to be able to get downtown. Community identity, they wanted a place that is vibrant, safe, and welcoming with a strong emphasis on walkability and spaces that cater to diverse populations. Areas of inspiration were Beaverdale, Valley Junction, and the East Village. People wanted outdoor dining, kid-friendly spaces, and better parking. So that is just some early high-level results. We'll keep this open another week or so, and then we'll summarize all the data out to you. But I think from the staff perspective, as we conclude the discussion tonight, we need a head nod from the council. Are you comfortable with where we're going? We're not done yet. And questions about, like Councilmember Crowley, you asked, the interplay between Aurora and Douglas, and it's good to have John Larson always asking the question. Let's make sure that we design the roadways well, but we just need to know if we're on the right track or if we need adjustments. Any thoughts? I'm seeing head nods, but
I think we're on the right track.
we're on the right track. Okay. With that, I think we'll keep going, and we'll be back again at the 2/3 mark, and see where we're at then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we will move on then to mayor and council items. Bridget?
Well, it feels like an entire lifetime has passed since we last had a meeting. Oh, sorry, I said it appears like an entire lifetime, at least to me, has passed since our last meeting. But it's only actually been 2 weeks, and so I wanted to congratulate our fellow council member, Larry McBurney, for his election to the state legislature, as well as our former council member, Matt Blake, and his election to the state senate. I was able to attend a couple of events last week, Mid-Iowa Health Foundation 40th anniversary celebration, and just really proud to be a partner with them and all the amazing work that they're doing. Quickly ran from there to a celebration of service for Supervisor Bob Brownell. That was very moving. His speech was what you'd expect from him, I think. So I was glad to be able to be there. Hopefully he'll be able to come here one last time. I don't know if that's in the books
Well,
or.
we better, because I just noticed he posted about Johnson, so I.
Oh, okay. Well, we better get one last update, especially with family on up here now. So, and then I guess just related to DART, Mayor Bob's meeting in the morning with the city of Des Moines and a few other entities, and I feel pretty comfortable saying that we are going to move forward with Reimagine DART and go back to business as much as possible as usual, which is not really usual at all. I mean, given the financial times that we're living in with the state and things like that. But Larry's going to take care of all of that for us.
Me and my 32 friends.
So, yeah, in relation to DART, I think we're on a back to as sane a path as we can be on. So
All right.
that's it.
All right, thanks. Pat?
Well, ditto everything Bridget said, as per usual. Thanks to everybody and congratulations to folks. And but the one item I wanted to bring up was when we have that CIP public hearing on December 16th, I think that's the date, I think it's really important that we have prepared a handout related to the Aurora and the 70th projects. And I think they need to make it really clear that the bike lanes are not intended for kids. They're intended for commuter cyclists. I think it needs to be really clear that the safety issues are the driving force, but that's not expected to solve all problems related to pick up and drop off of students at the schools. And I think it needs to include some data about the number of projects like this that have been put in place across the country and how they have in fact slowed traffic, made things safer, so that we have a little backup besides that kind of thing. So I think we need to put together sort of a very compressed version, no more than 2 sides of a page, and have that ready to go, because otherwise I'm pretty sure we're going to have some people there. I would be surprised if we don't. And then it would also be nice to have it for the January meeting as well.
Yep. Yep. All right. We'll make sure that happens. Thanks, Pat. Good idea. Amy?
Just great Veterans Day event that we had last Monday. I was glad to see some city staff, even though they didn't have to work, be present. MAC, we had a good meeting at MAC. I'll let you talk about that if you want.
Okay.
And then we met on Thursday regarding the Human Services Strat Plan. So we had our first kind of real working meeting, and I'm really excited to see the energy and the ideas that are already coming out of that group. So more to come.
Blake?
The only thing I was thinking about as we were talking about just development projects and everything in general, I haven't heard about an update from our friends at the former Motel Relax in some time. So it'd be interesting to kind of see how that project's going and kind of what the next steps are. Because it looks like there's stuff going. So
Yeah.
They are working.
yeah,
Rocking and rolling.
so looking forward to hearing more. Thanks.
Larry?
I know Sally Dix from Bravo had reached out to me, and AJ, I think we're going to coordinate. They want to come speak to the council as far as all the talks that have been going on about regionalism, because it may have started with DART, but it has spread rapidly from there.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to hear from her and hear her perspective. I did tell her that from my opinion, we've continued to express the value that we've seen in return for our investment into Bravo, not just in the public art space, but also in just our local nonprofits and a lot of the different programs that we tend to offer through things like Living History Farms, through the Urbandale Historical Society, et cetera, et cetera. So just really re-expressing the thanks that we have for what we have gotten back, but also just a recommitment that we're going to continue to push some of our local nonprofits to get a little bit more, get as much as they possibly can from it. So it'll be interesting to hear from her. And then, yeah, just echo what Amy said about Veterans Day celebrations, both on Friday, or the Friday before, serving folks at the Senior Center, and then the program that we had here on Monday. Thank you, Mayor, for your words, and I appreciate working with our local American Legion and VFW groups to make sure that, we hear from our local communities. So, yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. And Larry had some great words as a veteran too, so thanks for doing that at the Senior Center. And just to plan ahead, I think Nicole's got this down, but we're going to celebrate Larry and his service to the city at the January 7 meeting prior to the regular meeting. So we will have a reception then. So plan to be here a little early for that. And I believe your table, there's a recap of a history of that. We'll need to speak very soon about how we go through the process of filling that vacancy before the next election. So let's keep that in mind, and we'll have that discussion here very soon. So with that, I also had just a few things. I'll go to Mac as Amy alluded to, and I'll let her certainly chime in. Anything I get over or look over. But I think you saw the summary on the email about Halloween Beggars Night discussion. We'll have further discussion, but I think that's leaning toward actual Halloween will be the shift, but with the focus that whatever's decided on is communicated well and communicated in a coordinated manner rather than piecemeal. And so I think that was the message clearly moving forward on that. We're working on some, we had some more discussion on legislative. Again, it's anybody's guess exactly what's going to happen, but I think everybody's prepared to work together and coordinate on a message for that. You want to mention the housing thing that you were working on?
For housing purposes, we are going to let Capital Crossroads kind of do their thing and not get in the way and let them take the lead because they're doing quite a bit of inventorying of a variety of different housing options that are available. For social issues, we're going to have representative from the Sobering Center, once that opens, come and speak to MAC. I think we're looking at June for that. And then on the communications front, we talked about having one PowerPoint that kind of overviews what does city government do.
Yes, yeah.
That council members could take into their own schools. So it was nice to see that was a conversation that not only had we had, but then it had also came up at a different committee.
Yeah, kind of the speakers bureau for
Yeah.
and then we do that too. So yeah.
And comm staff will be working on that from the variety of different cities.
Yep.
Whether or not they know it.
Derek's not
not here, so yeah.
You walked by quickly, I think.
And I just have a couple other things. Again, next Tuesday, just having your calendar, 5:30, the tree lighting.
Yes.
So we're guaranteed to have a snowstorm between now and then.
Absolutely.
And then I also want to report, and AJ will get more detail in his weekly report, but Our police department did receive their reaccreditation for Kalia last Saturday. So that's great news. So they're reaccredited for another 4 years. So again, that's their third reaccreditation. They were originally accredited in 2013. It used to be a 3-year process. They were reaccredited in 2016, then again in 2020, and now again for 2024. So, and you know, just to highlight the benefits and the strengths of accreditation. First of all, we're one of the few jurisdictions nationwide that would have both of our fire and police accredited. So that's certainly a mark to be proud of, and obviously the benefits of just having those processes and standards in place help from the personnel standpoint, and also help as we operate as a city. And frankly, it goes down to insurance rates. I mean, it helps on insurance rates. So very proud of our agencies to take the initiative to get the accreditation and reaccreditation, and it's nothing that's, as you can tell, it's nothing that just sits on the shelf. They have to keep working and living it and keep renewing that. So so kudos to them, and we'll get some more information out, and we will celebrate the police department's reaccreditation here in the near future. That's what I have, and would ask then for a motion to enter into a closed session pursuant to Iowa Code 21.51J.
So move.
Motion by Bodie.
Second.
Second by Kroll. Discussion, please vote. That passes. All right, we will enter into closed session shortly here.